I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
I've heard some people go, they'll talk about going someplace and like, well, since I'm going to be in Paris, I should go to the Louvre. And I always hate when people say, I should go. Well, do you want to go? Is usually my question back. Is that, are you interested? Because if you're not interested in art and you'd rather just eat your way through Paris, then, then do that instead. Or if you're more interested in, the architecture, take a tour for that, or a cooking class or whatever. You don't have to go to things, there's no should, we say you're shoulding all over yourself, don't do that. It's what are your interests?
That is today's guest, Lynne Nieman. She first traveled to Europe on a solo trip back in 2005, completely fell in love with the old continent, and has since spent the majority of her own personal travels in Europe. But on top of that, she is a professional travel planner. She focuses solely on Europe, and she helps people create the perfect itinerary, find the best accommodation, figure out the ideal way to get from point A to B while having all those experiences you want to have. And we're going to get her advice today for you, but with a twist. I didn't want this to be just general travel advice. I really wanted to focus on the state of travel in Europe today and how you can set yourself up for an incredible experience and an unforgettable trip in the next year or two based on what's happening right now and where things are going in the coming year. And that's exactly the framework we use for this conversation. You're going to hear, of course, some of those lesser visited destinations you might want to consider, suggestions of where to go to avoid that mass tourism that seems to be only growing, what is considered quote unquote normal in terms of the number of tourists nowadays in Europe, and when should you travel? Is revenge travel over? There's a new visa you need to be aware of. How are things going to change in the coming years? A ton of stuff going on in this episode. I know you're going to love it. So we're going to dig in right now. Buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. And you can check out Lynne's work over at wanderyourway.com, and she has her small group tours over at wanderyourwayadventures.com. We'll link up to all of it in the show notes. Of course, we're going to hit on the planes, trains, and automobiles. By the way, it's around Thanksgiving time in the United States, and that is a Thanksgiving movie, the best Thanksgiving movie, dare I say, out there, one of the greatest comedies of all time, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. In this context, of course, we're going to be talking about that in terms of transportation, how to get around, and that is just one small part of a wonderful conversation that's filled with a lot of great perspectives, ideas, advice, destination recommendations, just a load of things to help you plan your next trip to Europe or your first trip to Europe. And by the way, before we dive in, you'll hear me encourage you to grab a pen and paper. Maybe come out of this episode with a sketch of your own trip. what it looks like, where you might want to go. Even if you don't have that, perhaps just some general ideas of what type of experiences you want to have. Use this episode as an opportunity to make a trip to Europe real. Grab a pen and paper and let's dive in. Before we do, don't forget, we have a newsletter, zerototravel.com/newsletter. It is free and you can sign up over there. Please enjoy my conversation with Lynne Nieman. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the other side. Cheers. Excited to welcome my friend Lynne Nieman back to the Zero to Travel podcast. How you doing, Lynn?
I'm good, Jason. I'm sorry you're a little under the weather, but we're going to power through.
Hey, it's all good. We have to bring people these tips that you're bringing today, how to plan a trip to Europe in the coming year. We've got, dare I say, a plethora of topics to cover.
Yes, we do. We
that
certainly
just came
do.
out from like some vocabulary test I took in 5th grade or something.
I love that word. That's one of my favorite words, actually. Anytime I can use it, I'm going to grab a hold of it.
Okay, there you go. Well, we had our chance and we took it. All right, so your website, we should remind people, Wander Your Way. You've been, for a decade, you've been planning independent trips to Europe. You've been planning trips to Europe for different clients. You're going to be running trips to Europe coming up. So even as we're talking right now, you're wrapping up 6 months of straight travel through Europe. All this is to say, you've been around Europe. You know the deal.
I do. I hope so.
So I have asked you, as a professional European travel planner and as a traveler yourself, and a semi-nomad, I would say in some ways, to come up with some, I mean, I wouldn't say it's all going to be counterintuitive, but just like, let's look at the travel season coming up and think about just kind of where travel's at, where we're at, and see if we can come at this with a few different things that can help people plan their own trips, or, you know, if they want to check out your small group tours, of course, that's something that they can check out too. But first, yeah, let's talk about your recent trip. It's been 6 months. You know, we used to work together in the past. We've been in touch, and I know you had, you know, quite a difficult time with the passing of your father. I hope it's okay to bring this up.
Yes, of course.
And that changed, obviously, your life after that, kind of where you're going to live and kind of how you're going to travel. I'm just wondering, like, what is the travel lifestyle for you right now? Are you just spending these chunks of time in Europe just to kind of help with the planning side of things, more for personal pleasure, a bit of both?
I'd say, you know, so my dad passed away in March of 2023. So when I took off in like a couple months later, 2.5 months later in 2023, I think it was a little bit of everything. It was a little bit of pleasure because of, you know, obviously, you know, taking care of him at the end. It's a lot of caretaking, and part of it was obviously business. And I was gone for 8 months. And during that time, I didn't know where my home was going to be because we were selling, you know, my childhood home, which I had been living in with my parents when my mom was still alive, and then just my dad. So for me, it's been a bit of a journey, I think, personally, a lot of reflection time, as well as the business and what my digital nomad life looks like moving forward and what I wanted it to look like. I mean, I always thought that I might want it to be traveling all the time and spend more time in Europe. But you know, I was also kind of feeling a bit untethered, is the word that I kept using during that time. And it was later, it was about this time last year, in kind of October, where my sister and her husband had moved, they're retired, they had moved into a new home. And my sister was showing me around, you know, we're on a Zoom call, and she's like, and here's your bed, here's a room if you want it. And it just kind of gave me that sense of relief, like, okay, I have a place. My stuff, you know, it's like, there's my bed. They fixed it up, you know, so I had a nice spot, and
they
you know,
want
I
you there.
And they actually, yeah, they're like, they're okay with me being there. And so, you know, so when I went back in January of 2024, after almost 8 months, and I settled into this place, I was like, it was the realization, I think, that as somebody who thought, oh, I'll be fine, just flitting and floating around, that I realized, no, I think I need a home base. Not that I'm going to be there all the time, and I'm not ready to like own my own place or anything like that. That might come down the road. But the fact that I just had somewhere that I had my own bed and I could keep my own things, and as a photographer, and like, I feel like, and with the passing of, now with both my parents gone, it was like there were all these family photos, and I wanted to be able to keep that stuff and have a place for that stuff. So now I have that. And I think that now has kind of, given me that home base. And, I think kind of moving forward, my digital nomad life will be a little bit different. I may not travel as long as stretches of time. It might be like a few months, then I go back for a few months and things like that. So it's been an interesting journey. It's been a learning experience, and something that, a little bit of that discovery of that life, because it can change. You can picture it one way and you think, oh, this is what I want. But, even, other people that you run into, sometimes they go out and they try it and they're like, yeah, maybe it's for me. They love it. Some people love it and they're fine with not having a home base. And other people, I've heard some people say, no, I think I need a home base. So I need a home base.
Yeah. I mean, there's power in just the going and knowing kind of thing, right? Like, yeah, you made the adjustments you needed to for your lifestyle based on how you were feeling, and you have the flexibility to do that. And that's important. I mean, I think like you said, you assumed, or you thought your kind of vision for your life, it sounds like, after you were sort of done with the caretaking portion, was that, you were going to spend these huge chunks of time and didn't really need to have that home base. But then it turns out it was differently. And I'm just bringing that up one more time because it's kind of another reason to, like, if you're being called to go travel or something, the longer you put these things off, like, part of it's like figuring out if it's actually what you want too. Like, maybe you do it and it's not what you want, or you just, you make the adjustments accordingly, but you don't really know until you actually do the thing. You're kind of dialing it back is 6 months in Europe instead of 8 months.
Well, yeah.
Which makes you fit right into this show. That's for sure. And I should mention, if you're like, why is Lynne's voice so buttery smooth? Because she has a podcast of her own. And we will link up to all of that.
Thanks to
you. But yeah, so I think that's, it's funny. Yeah. Like, only in this show, in this community, is it like, I'm dialing back to 6 months from 8 months. But I know what you mean. It's not necessarily the amount of time, it's the sense of place. And to have a sense of place somewhere, I think, like, after a while, any nomad kind of has like a craving for some kind of community sort of stability type of thing, in a way.
Yeah.
You're traveling solo too, right? I mean,
yeah. And I mean, that's the other thing. Although this year, so you asked about that, you asked about my travels this year. And I think one of the things this year is, compared to 2023. In 2023, I had a few spots where I actually, I was solo traveling the whole time, but I did see some friends, especially here in Scotland where I am right now in St. Andrews. But I also kind of like stayed in places for like a month at a time. And so I think that makes a difference. I don't think I've done more than 2 weeks at a time on this trip. But I did actually meet up with some friends of mine from the States. I traveled for 2 weeks with them in Germany. That was really nice. And that was kind of the first time I had really done something like that. And I'm pretty choosy about who I travel with. So shout out to my friends Mindy and Bill, that they were great travel partners, and they were great when I said, I need to stay back today and I need to work, and Mindy would always go, are you sure? And I'd be like, yes. And then she would drop it. Like, she didn't press me like, oh no, come on, kind of that kind of thing. They were very respectful, and they were great to travel with. So that was helpful. And then, I started in Ireland. I have a friend there, so I got to see her. I have friends here in Scotland, so I've, gotten to spend some time with them too. So that's good. But yeah, that's a big part of it when you are traveling alone. That's where sometimes you're like, yeah, I'm ready to go back because I'm ready to be with my family or my friends back home. I'm fortunate that I have friends all over, but because I also spent some time. I spent like 6 nights in Switzerland, just kind of outside of Geneva, with a friend there. So that was really nice to be able to have that, and to be able to just, hang out with a friend and have some of that time. It does get lonely.
Sure. That's part of the experience, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
And then, of course, like you said, the opportunities for reflection sounds like we're abundant on this leg. We're going to get into sort of some of your planning tips for the coming year, 2025. And, a lot of these are probably going to be geared towards what most people would do, right? That would be like, I in this audience, who knows what that is most people 3 months, 5 months. I mean, I would say, most people, like, it might be like 3 to 4 weeks. I would say people listening to this show, they want to have like the authentic sort of travel experience. They're probably not the ones always going to be hopping on the bus with 50 people or whatever to see Europe. There's nothing wrong with that, but just different travel styles. And I'm just bringing this up because since you're going to be providing these tips, I did want to hear kind of what like the perfect itinerary means to you. There is no perfect itinerary, I would say, but just I think that question will kind of give us an insight into sort of your mindset and how you approach planning.
I think the perfect itinerary for a person is the one that takes into account their interests, their budget, their time frame, and kind of their style of travel, which might mean, some people do like to like go. They want to see everything. That's fine. I definitely get people that, they want to pack their days. I get other people that I work with that are like, yeah, we want to be sure we have some downtime, or, we'll just kind of wing it. So I think that the perfect itinerary is just so individual. And I know that's what I try to do when I work with people, especially if I'm working on a customized trip for them and really kind of doing like everything. I try to get to know them so I can get a sense of all of those things. Where do their interests lie? Do they want to, are they just, people that just want to be on the go all the time? Or do they want to have a more relaxed pace? Do they want to have a lot of things planned, or do they want to kind of wing it a little bit? So the perfect itinerary really is very individual, in my opinion. And that's how I typically approach working with somebody.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you're listening to this and you're going to use some of these ideas to plan, then perhaps, I guess, your advice is those are the questions you should be asking yourself right from the get-go, right?
Exactly.
Like interest, kind of style, how quickly do you want to move?
I feel like for some people too, like I've heard some people go, they'll talk about going someplace and like, well, since I'm going to be in Paris, I should go to the Louvre. And I always hate when people say, I should go. Well, do you want to go? Is usually my question back. Is that, are you interested? Because if you're not interested in art and you'd rather just eat your way through Paris, then, then do that instead. Or if you're more interested in, the architecture, take a tour for that, or a cooking class or whatever. You don't have to go to things, there's no should, we say you're shoulding all over yourself, don't do that. It's what are your interests?
Yeah, that is such a great point, Lynn. I mean, just to kick this off, it's kind of like, yeah, just because society says this is something that's important because, Western civilization has deemed this artwork or whatever the case is important over time. But like you said, yeah, you have no interest. I mean, it's like, yeah, that's a good way to think about it, because don't guilt yourself into like spending half a day doing something you don't really care that much about, but you feel like, oh, I feel like obligated. It's like traveler's guilt, right? Like, I'm all the way here. I've got to see the Mona Lisa, but do you?
Yeah, you don't. And she may just disappoint you anyway.
I've seen it.
Yeah, so have I. I've seen it twice, and I'm like, it's very small, and there are always crowds of people around it. So anyway.
Yeah, we're not saying don't go see the Mona Lisa, by the way, but some good food for thought. Okay. We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop. Now, back to the show. I mean, I think that's a great framing for like diving in. Where do you want to start here? We've got questions of planes, trains, and automobiles. I know we're going to talk about some sort of like up and coming destinations, resources.
Why don't we start with this? Let's kind of talk about like how I think things are probably going to change, because what the travel industry is telling us is that 2024 was probably the peak of the post-COVID travel, which means everybody was kind of out there, the revenge travel and the bucket list travel. You know, it's like everybody kind of wanted to go because you couldn't go anywhere. So things have been very, very busy over the last couple of years in Europe. And believe me, I've seen it, obviously, from traveling. And it's going to be interesting because I think now in 2025, as we kind of move forward, I think they keep saying things are going to normalize. Now, what's normal, you know, because we've gone through a pandemic, so the new normal might be a little bit different. But I think what we're going to see is that maybe people have done some of the bucket list stuff. And so maybe now they're seeking different destinations. So maybe they've done Rome, Florence, and Venice in Italy, but maybe they want to go back to Italy and they want to go to some lesser visited cities like Turin in the Piedmont region, or Trieste in the Friuli Venezia Giulia region, or Bologna and Emilia-Romagna. So they're going to seek out things like that, kind of, you know, almost third, fourth tier cities. Or they're also maybe going to think about different experiences. You know, they've done the bucket list, so maybe they want to start to travel more with friends and family. It looks like there's going to be a big trend for people like renting out homes, you know, whether it's an Airbnb or a VRBO or whatever, and really kind of connecting with their people. There's a lot of multi-generational travel that's been going on. I think that's probably going to keep going. And I also think that, you know, during COVID, we were all going into the outdoors because we were trying to avoid people. But I think then when COVID started to end, then we're like, oh, let's go to the cities in Europe and let's, you know, see those bucket list places and, you know, Paris and Berlin and London. And now I think they're going to start to trend back towards, you know, like, you know, going more back into the outdoors again and seeking out some of those kind of different sort of experiences in Europe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, coming off the sort of the revenge travel thing, I didn't even think about that. Like the coming year, you're saying the dust is going to kind of settle from that. And so we're going to see some different sort of destinations pop up as perhaps attracting more people, I guess. One of the first things people look at, you know, especially coming into the year, is like, when are we going to go? Like, let's figure out. I did want to say, as you listen to this, like, why not kind of like get a pen and paper and just like sort of plan a trip to Europe, like while you're listening to this, right? Like, talk about empowering, you know, if you're like, I've always wanted to go to Europe but never been, or you've been like a million times and you want to go back and see some different things, like, let's get into it. Like, start writing down some notes, like top of your mind, like, what are some of the things, like how fast you want to travel, how much you want to see, what is your budget, time frame, all that kind of stuff. Just jot it down, you know, don't overthink it. Just kind of get some ideas on paper. And then, you know, it would be fun to hear from anybody listening that comes out of this, like, oh yeah, like I kind of sketched something out. Exciting. Okay, so then we're looking at when, right? And if you're taking into account like the sort of the trend you outlined there, can you just lay out like what you foresee in terms of like the seasons? And I know like not everybody can travel in the off season. It's just the way it is. Like now when I travel with my kids, because they're off in the summer, I just like miss traveling in the off season to some of these places, which I would go to normally during the on season, let's call it. But you do what you got to based on your schedule. So
right. Yeah. And that's what I would say. So what's happening is, because we've had these massive heat waves too, over the past couple of summers in lots of parts of Europe, that if you are going to travel in the summer, if you have to, or if that just works out best, or that's when you want to, people are going to avoid going to some of your, Southern Europe, Mediterranean type places, and they're going to come see you, Jason, in Norway.
Oh, yeah. I can see it happening already. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say you probably have. So people are, they kind of call them coolcations, so people are seeking out those sort of cooler destinations. So they're going to the Scandinavian countries. They're coming to, like I'm in Scotland, I'm in the in the UK, so it's going to be cooler here. Ireland, the Baltics, Iceland. People or they're going to also maybe forego the beach because it's going to be too hot. Along the the Côtes or however it's pronounced in France. They're going to forego that, and they're going to go into the mountains because it's going to be cooler. So they're going to go into the Alps or the Dolomites or the Pyrenees, places like that, and maybe try to find those cooler places to enjoy the summer. The other side of the coin is people are then, if they can, they are going to travel more in what used to be the shoulder season. So like think maybe like, April, May, September, October. And I can tell you that I spent the first week of October in Verona, Italy, the second week in Florence, Italy, and I couldn't believe how busy it was for October. Florence, the second week of October, it might as well have been like the middle of summer, although it wasn't obviously hot, but there were so many people traveling. So it's going to be interesting to see if that is a trend that keeps going, because obviously like I ran into many, many more people who were retired or empty nesters, maybe some people that have very young kids that are not in school yet. So more like, they're walking around with their babies and their 2-year-olds. So the people that can travel in those shoulder seasons, that's when they're traveling. So it's going to be interesting because I don't know like if that's going to keep going on. And if it does, like what happens? Do we get a new shoulder season? Is there no off season, or is there an in season and an off season? So I think it's a TBD. So if you are thinking about traveling in the shoulder season, maybe be prepared that it's maybe not going to be as quiet as you thought. In fact, I even ran into a couple, I think on the train platform in Verona, and they had told me, and they were, retired age, and they had told me, I think that they had been in Verona, I think just maybe a year or two before that, at like the same time. And they're like, oh, it was so much quieter. And they're like, we can't believe how busy it was. And I'm like, yeah, I said it was kind of busy.
Okay. Well, yeah, I went to Rome way earlier this year, at the beginning of this year. Same kind of thing. I was shocked at how many people were there. Again, it's Rome. It's one of the one of the busiest places anywhere in the world in terms of tourism, but still like thinking, okay, this will be a good time. There won't be as many people. So I think, there's some mindset stuff there, perhaps. Like if you just, and I could, completely understand. Sometimes you could just be like, let's go to this alternative destination instead. I mean, I know you shared we're going to talk about some destinations and give some examples that you shared with me when we were prepping for this that are going to be like, maybe go here instead of here type of things. And I think that works to some extent, but like, if you want to see Rome and you want to go and see the Sistine Chapel, like it's understandable, but it's going in with the idea of knowing, okay, maybe in the coming year, like, don't get in your head that just because it's the middle of winter, it's not going to be crowded. Like, kind of accept that going into it, perhaps, is the takeaway for the mindset for
Yeah,
2025 planning. Would you agree with that?
I would. I would agree with that. I think you're just going to have to be prepared that a lot of these cities that are firmly on the tourist track are probably going to be busier more year round. And I would say Rome, depending, they have the Vatican has this Jubilee thing where a bunch of pilgrims are going to be there in 2025. You might want to avoid Rome next year. In fact, I'm working with my niece and her husband and their daughter. She's like, "Oh yeah, we'd like to go to Italy next year." And I'm like, "No, you don't," because I knew that they would want to go to Rome and go to the Vatican. And I'm like, why don't you put that off for a couple of years? Because I don't think you're going to want to deal with it. So yeah, so I think you're right. I think you just have to go with that open mind and say it's probably going to be busy.
Yeah. And I mean, the practical takeaway for that, I think, too, to add to it is it's not just a mindset thing to go in and understand, okay, like, let me, not be disappointed that it's crowded. It's also like a practical planning thing. Like, then that means if you're going in February, like I did, I think it was February, or like you're going in December, whatever, you need to like book the stuff in advance that you want to do there. And you have to treat it like it's a summer thing. So on those destinations that you want to see certain things, don't travel all the way there and find, because the Vatican Museum does get sold out. Like, you can't go. And if you're only there for 4 days and you're just like, oh, I'll just get tickets when I get there, like, you might not get tickets. So from a planning perspective, I'm always like, I like spontaneity, but like when I went to Rome, I planned everything. It was like, I knew I had like a schedule because we had like 4 days there, and it's not like my natural way as a traveler. But when you're with your family and I had small kids and stuff, I'm just bringing up this personal example because I think it illustrates what we're talking about. It was like, we're going into the Pantheon at this time. We're going, we've got tickets for the Vatican this day, because if you don't do that, you don't get to see those things. And it was my wife's first time there, and it was for her birthday. So I'm like, I know she wants to see these things. Now we don't have to do it again. If we go back next time, we can just like wander around a neighborhood and eat a random lunch and, maybe see a site or two, or maybe see some of the sites outside of the city instead of all those main things. But if you want to do the main things, you're going to have to lock it in. Even the spontaneous travelers, I'm sorry to say.
Yes. You know what? I agree with you, because you don't want to not see that. That's the other thing, is you want to be sure that that you don't miss it, like you said. So that's important.
Yeah. Well, should we get into some of the sort of destinations, like I alluded to, the sort of, this place maybe instead of these places? Because then I think like through that, we could get into some of the styles of travel. Like if you're somebody that wants to be more near like nature activities, if you're a solo traveler, if you're somebody who's like traveling with a spouse, and then also you have an expertise in some of these trails and walking and hiking, like village to village stuff, in particularly like in England, Scotland, and Ireland. So I do want to hear about your experiences and get some tips for that type of style of thing too. Does that sound like a good plan? Like if we just maybe go through the lens of the destinations and anything that comes to mind for you in terms of planning tips, I would love to hear those.
That sounds good.
Okay. Well, where do you want to start? I know that a lot of people go to Croatia to see the Game of Thrones stuff and all that. I'm just picking like some hot spots here that you sent over. Like you had some other recommendations. Italy, you mentioned. Like, where do you see like most of the crowds, most of the people you're working with wanting to go? And what would you say to them? Like, hey, have you looked at this? Maybe this is an option for you.
Okay. So recently, sorry, I have a dog barking behind me.
Are you house sitting?
I'm staying with my friends in Scotland, in St. Andrews, Scotland, but they have taken off on vacation to southern Spain, which is going to be, and I think Cora out there, the yellow lab, is seeing a dog probably walk by, and she's
you know what,
defending her territory.
We like dogs here. It's okay. We don't.
She's actually
dogs.
very.
We
sweet.
don't mind a little ambient noise here. It's all right.
Okay. So I just mentioned Spain. So I think, and having just kind of planned actually a honeymoon for some people going to southern Spain. Everybody wants to go to maybe Malaga or Seville or Sevilla, or maybe Granada, where the Alhambra is. But another city to think about going to is Cordoba. So, and I've personally not been here. It was, kind of one of the places I had hoped to go way back, I don't know, almost 20 years ago when I went there, and I didn't make it. And I'm kind of seeing it sort of popping up now a little bit on people's radars, like, hey, maybe they should think about going to Cordoba. So that's sort of one of the places that kind of comes to mind. You brought up Croatia. And I think that so many people go along what's known as the Dalmatian coast, where Dubrovnik is and Split. But, you also kind of want to think about maybe Zagreb, which is the capital, which is inland, or the Istria region of Croatia. Damn dog. She's whining. Sorry. So that is a good place to kind of think about going. The Istria region is the region that's kind of up there that butts up against Italy. So it can be a nice thing too. If you are spending some time in Italy, you can maybe easily get over and actually see some time or spend some time in Croatia. Here in Scotland, a couple of places come to mind. First of all, is everybody wants to go to the Isle of Skye. It's so popular, and it's kind of having a little bit of problems with some over tourism. But we're starting to see, and my friend who I actually am staying with here, she's actually a blue badge driver guide for Scotland. We're starting to see people that want to go more to the Outer Hebrides, which would take in like Lewis and Harris, which I actually went to last year. Highly recommend. It's beautiful.
Lewis and Harris, that's the name of the town?
Lewis and Harris. It's one island, but it's also sort of like one landmass, but it's also sort of two distinct. The Lewis part is the northern part. It's about 2/3 of the landmass. It's a little flatter.
Because it sounds like a eyeglasses brand or something, Did you see my new Lewis and Harris shades? No.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's an island. And the southern half, the southern third is more mountainous.
I'm a real geography buff. Can't you tell, Lynn?
and it's more mountainous. There's some beautiful beaches there, and it's absolutely beautiful. And then below there are and I haven't been to these islands, but I've heard really good things about them. There's North Uist and South Uist, and you can actually like ferry, to all of them. And they're becoming a little bit more popular. So again, these are places that are, maybe not immediately on the main tourist track. So, another place to think about is so recently I was in the Bavaria region of Germany, and there's, a lot of people will stay in this, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Garmisch-Partenkirchen town. It's a good base for exploring the area, maybe getting out on some hikes. But I would think about maybe staying in a town like Mittenwald or the little village of Kroon, which is where I stayed with my friends, because you kind of get away from, being where all the people are, and, you're still kind of in the area, but you can stay in a different town that's maybe not as on the tourist trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's so many advantages to that. Like, first of all, thinking about like the Cordoba example, like if one of the things you want to do is just kind of, like one of the things I do is just kind of like sitting with the culture and trying to soak it up. So like, you go out to dinner at 11 or 12 o'clock or whenever the Spaniards are eating, which is super late.
I know.
And you have a big paella, and you could do that, in any city and be around Spanish culture. And it's not like a hit list of things. You're just kind of existing within the culture in some place. And when you're doing that, it's almost like more enjoyable when it's in random places. Obviously, I have more of an opportunity to like connect. Well, I shouldn't say this isn't like true across the board, but it can be easier to connect with people when they're not as jaded by tourism, especially like over tourism
or as busy.
now. Yeah. Or is busy. That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I think we kind of found that in Germany when I was traveling with my friends. We actually ended up going back to this one restaurant a second time because we really liked it. And because, like the waitress, like she chatted with us a lot. And I know the second time we went, there were a bunch of locals in this place, and it's like, if we had been over in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, it was much busier with, with more travelers. And at that time when it is really busy like that, the locals who are maybe, working there that are, kind of serving you, if you will, don't have the time because they're so busy. But if you kind of go to some place that's maybe not as busy, they have the time, and they also may have a little bit more of the inclination because they don't see as many travelers, and so they're may be a little bit more open to having that conversation. Be like, oh, what the first question sometimes you get is, how'd you end up here? Why did you come and stay in Kroon? And so people want to know that, and I think that that's always really appealing. Another place for me here in Scotland is that so many people want to go, like if they think about going in the Scottish Highlands, everybody thinks that they need to stay in Inverness. And Inverness has actually really, really grown. In fact, I don't think it used to have city status. And now I think recently and over the past maybe 5 years, it's grown to a point where it does. And so I decided I'm not really a fan of the place. And recently I actually had some clients that I had them stay kind of nearby at a little seaside village called Nairn, Nairn. And this woman was like, she was traveling with her 19-year-old daughter, and she's like, oh God, it was great. And so I booked myself there and I loved it. And that's now and it's just probably 30 minutes from Inverness. It's a great place to base yourself. There's plenty of stuff there, and you're right. There are lovely beaches to walk. So there you go. And you're in a place, and, I was like walking along the beach with the locals, walking their dogs,
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
But I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Now, back to the show. It's so funny you mentioned going back to the restaurant. Like, I've done that before. And sometimes you have like the traveler's guilt. Like, I'm supposed to be checking out different places. And then when you go back to the same one, because you just get a certain vibe and you like it, it's like a double-edged sword. You're like, on the one hand, I know I like this place and it feels like local and cool, and let's hit it up again. Then you get sort of like that sort of regularity feel that sometimes you need as a traveler. Like, as much as you can be a regular in a place, that you're staying in for a few days or whatever. But then on the other hand, you're like, I should be going and having a different food experience now. It's just it's funny. But, some of these places you're mentioning, like this one, this last one, Nairn, that you used as an example. Again, we can't like give every single piece of advice for every single situation, as we know. But I'm thinking, well, one of my favorite movies, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it. But I'm bringing Planes, Trains, and Automobiles up in this context for how to get around. And, when you use that as an example, like I immediately think, okay, that means you must have to have a rental car in that situation, right? Or maybe that's not true. Do you have some across the board advice for the coming year in terms of getting to these destinations or getting around, whether it's how far in advance to book things, for these different modes of transportation, where you're seeing places like, oh, absolutely don't rent a car there because you can do this instead, just anything that comes to mind around those 3 modes of transport. And then we should talk walking. Why not?
Yes, we should talk walking. I would say that one of the things is that it's going to be very country dependent on whether or not they have really good public transportation. Some place like Switzerland is absolutely amazing, having just been there. And and I didn't realize this, but my friend said that every little village, every town has to be serviced by public transportation, whether it's a train or a bus. So, if you're somewhere like Switzerland, you're going to be able to get from point A to point B very easily using trains or buses. And as long as you're comfortable doing that and are okay with the timetable, you can do that in, I'd say, quite a few places. But then there are countries like Ireland is notorious for not having great public transportation. I mean, you can get places by bus. There are some trains, but there it's like you probably want to rent a car. And I think again, it depends. Like if you're doing more like, city stuff, you're probably going to be able to get more, even some of these like, lesser visited cities, they're going to be serviced by trains and or buses. So you'll probably be able to get there. And again, if you've got the time, to be able to maybe adhere to those certain schedules, that's fine. If you want to get into, as I call it, the nooks and crannies, then you may want to rent a car. And I think that you see both. And I think, one of the trends I think that we're seeing more and more throughout Europe is that they're trying to deter people from doing short haul flights. So they want people to get on the trains more. And in fact, I think one of the new routes that is supposed to start, I think right at the very end of the year, is a Berlin to Paris. And I don't know that that's ever been really serviced very well. It's like an 8-hour train ride. And I think there'll be like Berlin to Paris goes at this time and Paris to Berlin goes at this time. I mean, they're not overnight. They're like 8 hours long. So you're doing it kind of during the day. And that's kind of a new thing because they're, trying to keep people from getting on a plane. And I know France in particular they're one of the countries I think that's kind of leading the way of trying to ban some of these short haul flights. So, and trying to really encourage people to get on the trains instead. Rail systems are like Spain is, I think, building out theirs a little bit more. So, I think that, you want to think environmentally, and I think a lot more people are trying to be that way when it comes to travel, then maybe you think about taking the trains or the buses. But if you want to get into the nooks and crannies, it's best to do a car and rent. I always tell people rent the smallest car possible. Pack light.
And they can get very small in Europe, these cars. The point on trains is an important one. I remember sharing a couple articles this year, my newsletter, in fact, relating to what you mentioned about France trying to curb short haul flights and Germany and offering these like insane train deals where you could pay a very little amount of money to kind of have like full access for a period of time to ride the trains. And, I'm bringing this up because I don't have like an exact deal on my fingertips, but this kind of like goes into the whole trend. What are the trends? How do we plan for the coming year? Perhaps if you're like, okay, I am going to be like a slow traveler and I'm open to where I'm going. Maybe you're looking for France or Germany or one of these countries where they have this like insane rail deal that you can take advantage and you can spend a chunk of your time just exploring one of these places because you're going to get this insane deal and that's going to help with your budget. Like it's just I'm just pulling this as an example because like I think that there's some overarching stuff here, but if you really kind of dig in and think about how it can apply to your situation, you might be able to leverage some of these trends to either extend your trip or spend, save more money, that sort of thing, which is like the full intention of this episode. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up because I think that's a really important point. And then it goes back to the experience thing too, right, Lynn? Like if you want to have like the train through Europe experience and it's just like you don't mind paying a little more for that because it's just like a cool thing to do, then go for it.
Yeah, it definitely is.
I think imagine sometimes the public transportation, depending on how far out there you get, can dictate where you end up spending the night.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the downfall is like I said, I do think that there are some countries that I kind of find that some people think, oh, I can just jump on a train, and it's like, you can't jump on a train just anywhere. It might be serviced by a bus. So, there just are some countries that are a little bit easier, I think, to get around if you do have a car. And again, I think it depends on what you want to do. So, I mean, personally, it's like I do rent a car in some of the places I'm going because I know that I'm going to want to, stop at will as well because, as a travel planner, it's like, oh, there's something interesting there. And I just, make that detour. So, yeah.
Yeah. Plus, that platform 9 3/4 is very difficult to find.
Yes, it is.
Harry Potter reference. Sorry, folks.
I got that one.
I had to go there. Okay. You're a Potterhead. Great.
I am.
I have read them all, I must say. All right.
I've read them multiple times.
Nice. We're going to get some resource recommendations as well. Ireland, by the way, not saying this is in everybody's bag, but countryside in Ireland, great place to hitchhike. Relatively safe. Yeah. Just throwing it out there. Talk about some of the walks you've done. And this is like a different style of planning, right? Like if you want to do the one that always I think about is like the West Highland Way in Scotland. Like, oh, that would be so cool. You're like, I like that at this stage, like the idea of just kind of like you're hiking, but then you get to like a village and maybe you like have a nice place to stay and a warm meal. That can be fun. I've done like the camping thing, but I haven't done like the village to village thing really. And so that's something I really want to experience in some places around the world. And I know there's some great like trails to walk and hike in Europe. Do you want to share a bit about your experience with that and then get into any planning tips for those people that might want to dedicate a segment of their journey to doing like either a longer trail or like maybe just even a smaller portion of one of these popular trails?
Yeah. I'd say anybody that wants to do it, do it. It's such a cool experience. The people that you meet along the way are going to be people that you're going to remember. I'm still friends with the one guy that I met here in Scotland doing the West Highland Way. In fact, I saw him a couple months ago, and it's a great way to slow travel and really kind of see a place and see the beauty of the nature, and maybe some really great, charming villages. I'd say the West Highland Way, less charming villages and more scenery. But there are those places. I mean, obviously, like one of the most famous ones is the Camino de Santiago in northern Spain. And of course, that one's like really, really long. So a lot of people don't have the 5 weeks or whatever to do it, but you can do a portion of it. I think there's one, the Portuguese Way, that actually ends there. And I think it kind of goes up on the northern part of Portugal, and then that little, I guess that would be that northwestern piece of Spain. I think that one's actually shorter. I've heard some people talk about that one. I kind of feel like that Ireland, like there's like so many people walk, I feel like in like Ireland and the UK. It's like just the thing to do. It's like you just run into people out always walking on the trails. And even when I've been in other places, sometimes it's like I run into people and where are they from? And they're usually from the UK. They're usually from the UK. But there are some other trails that you can kind of hit up. Ireland's got a few. They've got like the Kerry Way and the Wicklow Way and the Dingle Way. Those would all be kind of good ones to do. One that I just I didn't put down on the list there, Jason, but I was following somebody that I follow who's a blogger on Instagram, and she just did the Cotswolds Way. So that one definitely goes through like the different villages. I actually walked a piece of that, I think back in 2017, and that would
was
be
it Lisa
one.
Abent?
No, I think her name is, I want to say Kate.
Okay, yeah, because somebody we had in the show recently, she just did the Cotswold Way. So
oh, really? It's funny that I bring that up.
Random. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Cumbria Way, which I'm not as familiar with, but which be in like the Cumbria region of England, is another one that I think is kind of like, some of these ones, it can be an alternative. Like the West Highland Way has definitely gotten, I think is getting more and more popular, but there are some other ones here. There's like the Great Glen Way actually is an extension of the West Highland Way. So the West Highland Way starts like just north of Glasgow and goes up to Fort William. And then I think the Great Glen Way goes from Fort William up to Inverness. So that's one that like, maybe not as many people do because they're doing the West Highland Way instead.
Well, like in your experience, I know you can't speak to all these trails, but are these things that you need to, like, I know there are some services for some of these, maybe the more popular ones. I'm not really sure because I don't know a lot about the different trails in this area of Europe, but they offer like, they'll like transport your luggage to the next town, or they'll like book all the B&Bs for you or whatever, versus like, just showing up and winging it and trying to find it, which is something of course you can do and anybody can do. And you can maybe find a place or not, or be knocking on strangers' doors. Who knows, depending on when you go. Yeah. Just any advice around like for the people that want to maybe try to hit up one of these.
There is one company called Mac Adventures. Is it Mac or Max Adventures? I'm trying to remember if there's an S on the name at the end of it. I can kind of give you that resource.
Post the right one. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like they cover like every trail in the world. Probably not every trail, but I do think that a lot of them
like
can.
Max, M-A-C-S.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. As soon as I said that, I was like, that didn't sound right, Mac. It's Max Adventures. They support, so many of the trails. And so you would be able to do that where you would have somebody actually like having that support, moving your bag so you only have to take your day pack. That way you have things like, dry clothes and you don't have to carry your, toothbrush and all that other stuff. And then they would set up, wherever you're staying. So I do think that a lot of the trails, if you look on their website, they cover a lot, not just in Europe, but I think elsewhere as well. So I think that you can do that. And I do think that planning in advance can be good because you have to remember that sometimes when you're coming into some of these towns, they're small. And so they're not a whole lot there. There may only be a handful of places to stay. And if you're going up and knocking on somebody's door, or trying to get a room last minute, it may not be possible. If you're okay camping and you want to do it that way, that might be different. You might have, kind of depending on what country you're at and what their wild camping sort of rules and regulations and laws are, you might be okay with that. But if you want, the nice, warm, cozy bed, nice hot meal, you may be better off planning in advance, especially if you're going, kind of more in that, looking in the Northern Hemisphere, I would say in that May to September timeframe.
Okay. Yeah, like when you did the West Highland Way, because did you do a luggage transfer type of thing?
I had somebody actually plan the whole thing out, even as a travel planner. I found a very small company called Walker's Ways, and she was Lynn with an E, like me. So I was like, "You're hired. You're taking care of me." It was kismet. So yeah, this is meant to be, and it's a little bit more to do it that way, but it's worth it if you don't want to have to worry about doing anything like that and you have everything planned. And the other thing is, if you are walking by yourself and if a B&B is like, where's this person? They haven't shown up, you've got support. So that's kind of nice if you're doing it on your own.
Okay. So for like, that would be the pricier version versus like the DIY thing. But like, what can I ask you, like something like that? You did the trail for, I don't know how long. You did
1 week.
Like what? Okay, yeah. So 1 week, staying in a different place. They transfer the luggage. You remember roughly like what that costs? Again, like people can look this up online, but no.
I don't remember it. I don't remember how much it was.
No worries. But I think like,
that was 2017. So and my old brain is not remembering.
Sure.
So
I understand.
and I know. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the point was just that type of support exists. If that's something you're interested in doing.
it exists on a lot of the trails. I mean, it really does. Whether you're doing something more like an alpine trail, like I know one of the things I'd like to do, which I know is popular, it's not an alternate sort of thing, is the Tour de Mont Blanc, which, kind of is up at elevation and it goes around, circumnavigates Mont Blanc. So you get France and Italy and Switzerland. They have support for things like that as well. So,
Okay. You mentioned a couple of resources here. Were there any other resources you want to share for planning? I mean, of course, we have your website.
yes.
You can drop that, of course, but and anything else?
No, I think that there's so much information out there. I think that, you can find kind of reliable people like that have blogs or podcasts and can maybe get some information there. I think going to some of your, even like your quote unquote sort of typical, they would have been like travel magazines back in the day, or going to, even places like the BBC travel page or, just for like ideas. One website I do really like is smartertraveler.com. Smarter Traveler, Smarter Travel. Now I got to remember which one it is. They actually, it's smartertravel.com. And they have a lot of actually really good tips on their website as well. Just things like, comparing things like, what's the difference between TSA PreCheck and the clear thing? Just like little things like that. What not to pack in your bag when you're going through security. So that's kind of a good resource. The only other thing that I would say is we are just using our smartphones so much as we travel anymore. There is an app for everything. You will, gone are the days of the audio guides that you're throwing around your neck and you're getting the headphones, everything. There will be an app for this castle that you're going through or this, other historical site or this museum that you're going through. So pack your headphones and make sure your phone is charged and be ready to, have your audio guide that way. If you don't have like a regular guide, it's
Hate that
amazing.
Trend.
You don't
Hate
like
that
it?
trend. No,
I love
don't
it.
like it at all. It's just like every time I go somewhere, it's like you have to get on your phone again. It's like you always have to get on your phone for something. It's unbelievable. Anyway, I know it's convenient and maybe I'm just being a curmudgeonly right now.
It is very convenient. I find I really like it personally, but I get where you're coming from. Unless you're going to like have like an actual like guide guiding you around, then it's a little bit different.
Yeah. You mentioned the Vatican Jubilee in Italy and that Rome would be busy, in 2025. We didn't hit on this point, but I just wanted to bring it up because like as you're doing your planning for the coming year, it is always good to sort of cross-check and see if there's a giant festival going on. Sometimes you stumble on this when you're like getting ready to book and you're like, why are hotels so expensive on a Wednesday in this place? And then you're like, oh, so it's always good to sometimes scout that out to just make sure, like, obviously if it's a festival you want to go to, you're going to want to lock it in. And if you don't care about the festival, but it's just like filling every accommodation in town and driving the price up, you want to be aware of that and book early or like pick a different place to go type of thing. That's just another sort of,
that's a great tip.
I think
there are some things that are also like you may not be aware of that do happen on a yearly basis. So, obviously things like running of the bulls and, things like that you just, just double check and look. Usually if you just even Google something like festivals in Europe, 2025, you can come up with some of the big ones that will be happening. But if you got a specific country or, city or something like that, Google that and see what you come up with and just be aware before you kind of make those final plans.
Yeah. And for the longer term travelers that are wondering how Lynn's spending 6 and 8 months as an American in Europe, because the Schengen rules only allow for 3 months. I mean, a lot of people know this, but I think it's just worth mentioning in case there are some long-term travelers out there planning to spend a lot of time in Europe next year. How do you do that?
Well, in 2023, I just about spent my full 6 months in the UK. So that was one way. I really wasn't in the Schengen area as much. This year, I've been a little bit back and forth, and that's the way you can do is you can go to the UK, Ireland, even though they are part of the EU or not, they're not part of the Schengen. And of course, you still have some countries that you can go to, such as, Albania, some of the former Balkans, else like Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Turkey, places like that. You can go and you can get out of the Schengen because you can only stay in the Schengen for 90 days out of 180. Now, it's this rolling thing. I found actually a really good useful calculator, and I'll send you the link because it's awesome, because I was kind of like playing with that as I was making plans both last year and this year to see what works, because it can get a little confusing because it is sort of a rolling calendar.
Okay. So this what does this calculator do?
You just put in what dates, and then it'll tell you whether or not you're over or you still have so many days left.
For the visas.
For the Schengen.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, if you could send us that.
Yeah, I will. And one other thing that I do want to bring up is there is probably I think this will apply to Americans and Canadians, that there is going to be a little bit of a visa thing kind of going on with Europe. So it's the ETIAS. Is that what I'm thinking of? There's two different things where you're going to have to go online, fill out a form, be approved, and pay like €7 to get into the EU. And I think it's probably just, it might just be the Schengen countries. I'm not sure. I know it doesn't apply to the UK.
It's the ETIAS.
Yeah. So there's that, and then there's the EES, and I think that's the electronic thing where they're going to be doing the whole facial recognition and all that kind of stuff, which they're all going to. So you won't really get a passport stamp anymore, which is kind of sad. But that's just something I think they've been putting this off. It was supposed to happen like around COVID, and then COVID hit. So they're talking about, I think, early in 2025 of this visa. So please just be aware of that. I know, Jason, you can put some links to some resources for that, because you will have to do that and fill that out before you leave. And it's good for, I believe, 3 years. So if you're somebody that does maybe go to Europe every year, it's not like you're going to have to do it every year. You would just have to do it once. It's good for a few years, and then you do it again.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, it's
very
a big
much
deal. Dependent on the coming year. Yeah.
Yes.
You don't want to screw that up. We have I'll include a link to the who should apply page of the sort of official government website for this. And this is under the European Union's website. New requirements to travel to Europe. Definitely important to be aware of. Any other?
No, the only thing that I would just say is that, when you are thinking about traveling in 2025, again, I would just, I do think that there are some kind of interesting trends going on. I think people, the Northern Lights are still really good, going for that natural phenomena. I think people are still kind of wanting to do some of that dark sky things. There's a lot of dark sky parks kind of popping up in places in Europe. So that seems to be kind of an interesting trend. And
dark sky parks, meaning they're removed from light pollution.
Right. So you can really kind of see the constellations, and that's kind of been, I think that's been a growing trend over the past couple of years. Okay. Cool. And the Northern Lights are still supposed to be pretty good, I think, through 2025. So because of whatever's going on up in the atmosphere. And the other thing I would say is, I know you brought up something about spontaneity, and, when you are somewhere, and if you want to do something spontaneous, kind of just maybe find out if there is. I got lucky a couple of times that I just happened upon these like little festivals When I
the best.
and it's like, go with it. If all of a sudden you're hearing about, oh, there's going to be this, or there's a little market, or, the food market's going on this weekend, or, oh, there's this little, I saw when they brought the cows down in San Vigilio di Marebe in the Italian Dolomites. And it was like, all of a sudden I happened to walk out. I didn't even know anything about it. And all of a sudden the cows are coming down, just down the street, and there's people. And then there was a little, they all went over to this other area, and there was music and a little festival and food and everything. Same when I was with my friends in Germany, we happened upon some sort of religious something. And so we just kind of went with the flow. And so, when you do get to a place, see if there is anything going on, and I'm a firm believer in not having too much of your time planned so that you can be open to that spontaneity. So you can allow those things to happen. So, but check out, always ask the locals.
Cool. Yeah. And I mean, I guess you can Google these dark parks, and that's an interesting trend I hadn't really heard about. Just two other quick things. Have you used AI to do any planning, and what are your thoughts?
I have such a hard time with the whole AI thing, even for my business.
Again, with travel, it just feels wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I firmly believe in that personal touch. Like, that's part of like why I feel like if people are going to come to me to plan their trip, they're looking for my own personal experience, as well as then maybe, my expertise and just, all the reading and research and everything that I do if it's a place I haven't been to. So it's like AI, I want that personal touch. Very skeptical.
She's shutting it down. All right. What about for the remote workers out there? I mean, you're working and traveling. Are there, you want to share like your one or two favorite spots where you've been set up for a while and working? You felt like, oh, this is a good place to like base and get some work done. Because that is a different way of traveling too.
Yeah, it is. And I've definitely had a couple of places this time where I've had very spotty Wi-Fi. So, I do think that in general, I found that Scotland's Wi-Fi tends to be good, and it tends to be good in places that you wouldn't think it's good, which is kind of interesting. I was in Pitlochry for a good month in 2023, and I thought it was a nice spot because it is served by a train. So that's a good thing. And good Wi-Fi, nice little town. Wouldn't need a car, places to get out for a walk, little cafes. This year was the first time I actually went into any co-working spaces. And believe it or not, in my beloved little town of Castelroto, also known as Castel Ruth in the Dolomites of northern Italy, there's a co-working space. And that's where I did not have the best of Wi-Fi in my little holiday apartment. And I found this and I was amazed. It was very cheap. And I was the only person in there. There was, just very, very small because it's a very tiny village. But there was a co-working space. And then I did the same in Verona. When I was in Verona, I found a co-working space there. And there was a really nice co-working space in Florence, in the Oltre Arno, which is, I stayed kind of away from the historic center and was more with the locals.
That says a lot about the remote work movement and just, I mean, those co-working spaces in a small village like that can't just exist for tourists. It has to be that all of these, these residents are working remotely. And that really says a lot about how much has gone remote. I mean, compared to what it was just some years ago. Crazy. Also, maybe encouraging for those working travelers that you can find smaller places like this that have a place where you can go and co-work. And there is something nice about the separation of, going to a place and going get some work done and maybe coming back to your little village hut or whatever and just kind of being disconnected.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because I was complaining about it to my mastermind group, which Casey is part of my our friend Casey is in my mastermind group, and they were like, "Isn't there a co-working space?" I'm like, "No, this village is really, really small. There's no way there's a co-working space." And like 3 days later, because I was kind of just outside of it, I walked over and it was like right next to the bank. I looked and I went, oh, and I took a picture of it and I sent it off. I was like, guess what?
Nice.
There's a co-working space. And, went to the website and signed up and was able to get on there. So,
Amazing.
Yeah. But I found like for cities, like, I know Verona and Florence, like Florence in particular is a very popular place with travelers. But if you stay on the other side of the Arno, it's called the Ultra Arno area, which is another thing like I would recommend. That's a great place to stay in Florence versus staying in the historic center. But there was a nice co-working space there. And so, you could certainly like maybe find an apartment and stay and still be in, this beautiful, if somewhat touristed city, but you can also kind of be away from the tourist crowds, find a place, apartment, and then, you could have a nice co-working space as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Lynne, always a pleasure to catch up with you. Of course, if people want to go check you out, let them know, wanderyourway.com. We'll link up to it. Anywhere else you want people to go? I mean, it seems like that's where you have everything. That's your hub.
That's my hub.
Yeah.
But if you are interested I have 4 small group tours of, no more than about 12, 14 people, 2 going to Ireland and 2 for the Dolomites of Italy for 2025. And I'm calling those Wander Your Way Adventures. So you can go to wanderyourwayadventures.com and you can check out the group trips there. I'm super excited to share some of my favorite places with other people that are like-minded travelers and want to kind of hit up maybe some different areas to travel to and want to travel in a group, in a small group. It's not big motor coach stuff. And we're definitely kind of getting into some really interesting places. So some of my favorite places in the Dolomites, of course, getting out into nature. And then Ireland is going to be pretty cool because there's a few places that I've been. There's a couple of places that we're going to that I have never been in Ireland, and I'm really excited about. So
nice. And you're going to be leading all these trips?
Yeah, I'm working with, I have 2 different, I've got a company in Italy that I'm working with. So they'll provide a guide, and the same with the company that I'm working with in Ireland. And I'm in development for 2026 tours for Scotland, a couple for
Great.
Scotland.
Well,
So, yeah.
good luck.
So
Thanks again. Thanks for bringing your expertise to the show today in terms of like your decade of personal experience or more, I'd say, traveling, and then also planning trips for others. I think there's a lot of takeaways here people can kind of can digest and consider. And hey, if you've got like a piece of paper in front of you with like a little bit of a sketched out plan, let us know. I'd love to hear.
Yeah,
would love to hear what you got out of this episode. And this is always a 2-way conversation. This is a community powered show after all. So, and Lynne, I know your work is very community driven as well. So I just appreciate about you and that you're always willing to share and provide value. And thanks for taking time to put this together. Yeah, we'll run into you somewhere in Europe, hopefully in 2025.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
Always. Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Ciao.
There you have it. Thank you to Lynne Nieman for stopping by the show. By the way, she has a podcast as well. Wander Your Way, it's called. Same as her website, wanderyourway.com. Check it out if you want more of the delicious goodness on Europe. It's all focused on Europe over there, everything she does. So I hope this was helpful. By the way, is that piece of paper, the pen, the paper, well, hopefully, obviously you didn't do that if you were driving, I hope. But if you have something sketched out from this episode and you don't mind, take a picture of it and send it to me. I'd love to see what you're up to. And you can reach me anytime on email, jason@zerototravel.com. Of course, I read all the reviews. Those are always nice to get. And we have our free newsletter over at zerototravel.com/newsletter where you can sign up. I send it out once a week. You'll hear some personal updates, mix of travel stuff. You'll see. Just go sign up and join the community over there. Speaking of the community, thank you for being here, for being a part of it, for listening to this show. It truly means so much. And you are the fuel that keeps this fire that is my podcasting life burning, because I just had my podiversary actually this month, 11 years of the Zero to Travel podcast. I haven't done anything for 11 years. I mean, outside of like breathing and surviving. So anyway, that's really a testament to you and all of the listeners out there. Without you all, I wouldn't have been continuing on with this, I don't think, for so long. It's just so rewarding to be able to bring on such lovely guests just to share a conversation that hopefully provides value to you in your life in some way. And I am going to continue to work to do that. And please let me know. This is a two-way conversation. I'm bringing this up because if you do have any guest recommendations, thoughts, ideas, how to improve, whatever, just get in touch. I am here for you, my friend. I'm here to serve you. That's what this is all about. This podcast is for you. So please let me know. Okay. I'll leave you with a quote on crowds because, that was a big theme today. It is, of course, getting more crowded than ever in certain places in Europe, but you can come and have a completely different type of experience if you take some of the advice you heard today, if you just follow your intuition, if you do a little bit of research, perhaps listen to those locals that are pointing you off in some random direction that you don't know, but maybe they know, hey, this is a really cool village. People aren't coming here, whatever. Get out there, extend your travels as deep as you can, find those nooks and crannies, and I will leave you a quote on crowds because ultimately we are, even if we go out there, we're going to end up back in some places where it's just going to be a lot of tourists and we're going to be one of those tourists. And that's okay. I think that can be fun too. Sometimes I just fully embrace the tourism. I'm like, you know what? Here I am. I'm like a tourist. There's a lot of tourists here. I'm going to do this hop on, hop off bus thing, or I'm just going to just revel in my touristic mentality. And that's cool too. And I'm sure I'm not alone there. And when I get to those places, you could just bask in it and enjoy it. Why not? And this leads me to this quote from P.T. Barnum, who said, "Every crowd has a silver lining." Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.